Hi, everybody. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, letting people in. Okay, everybody. I'd like to get started because I want to honor your time. And this isn't a long webinar, so we should probably be done within an hour, and we should be able to get you out by then. Also want to remind everybody that this webinar will be recorded. We'd love to have you here in person because it gives you an opportunity to ask your questions in real time. But if you want to go back and refer to something that we discussed, then it'll be recorded. The recorded session will be on our YouTube channel. It will be Sacramento Office of Arts and Culture. My name is Melissa Cerrone, and I am the program manager for the Sacramento Office of Arts and Culture and have been organizing this California Creative Core program for the Capital Region. This is a grant writing workshop, so it's very specific to actually writing the grant application and working on it and looking through the guidelines. It's not the big overview of the entire California Creative Core program. So we don't get into a lot of the sort of the deep dive into the program. I don't spend a lot of time talking about the California Healthy Places Index in this webinar. We had originally done an orientation webinar, and that is also archived on our YouTube channel. And you can find links to everything on our website, and I'll give you the link to our website as we move on. So again, this is specifically for the guidelines and for the application. So here is the agenda for this afternoon. We're going to talk about what is Creative Core, just a sort of general overview. I really want to focus on the 4 priority areas because that's really where you're going to focus your attention and your application. We're going to look into what priority communities are, which means where you'll want to be situating your programs if you do go ahead and do an application. They're very, very specific communities that we're going to need to be working in, and they will all relate to the California Healthy Places Index. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to spend most of our time on the guidelines. And just so that you remember, there are 2 grant programs that are open right now. One is for what we call the mid-size grants, and the other one is for the large grants. The mid-size are $117,000, and the large grants are $300,000. So they're all pretty substantial. We will be opening a program for individual artists who want to work within the city government offices. That program's not open yet, and we'll do more outreach around that program when it does open, probably in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. But this program is really specific to organizations or artist collectives. Those will really be the 2 types of organizations. And when I say organizations, primarily nonprofit organizations. So this really is not a program that's open specifically for the applicant to be a for-profit business. As I said, we're going to spend a lot of time on the grant rubrics and outcomes for the grant. I really want you all to really lean into the rubric because that is really how the applications are going to be reviewed. We're going to talk a little bit about some of our outreach activities so that we can hopefully connect you to some people working in this area. So we'll have mixers that are going to be happening throughout all the areas that the program is going to be run. We'll talk about the deadlines, and we will give you an opportunity to ask questions. All the questions you should be asking in the question and answer. I'm not going to be checking the questions throughout the entire time because I think that's a little distracting. So we will break at a certain point, look at the questions that have come up till that point. And then I just want to open the application for you so that you can kind of see the application. Okay, so first of all, what is Creative Core? I think it may be a little confusing if this is your first introduction to it, but it is a statewide program. The state of California received approximately $60 million to administer a program throughout the state. The most important things to remember, it is really an economic recovery program for artists. And you'll see as we begin to talk about it that most of the work and most of the funds for the grant are really going to go directly to artists for this program. It's also a workplace development program for artists. We really believe, and I think people in the state agree, that this is the type of program, if successful, and if we can have successful outcomes, will lead to more opportunities for artists to work in different places, in different ways, and actually expand what they're able to do within communities. And it's also a media outreach and engagement campaign. So the focus of what you would be doing and the focus of your grant applications is how you would do outreach and engagement with very specific communities. Where is the program taking place? This is a little bit different for us here in the city of Sacramento. If you've worked with us before, you know that most of our programs and our grants go to the city of Sacramento or a city of Sacramento office, but we also very often fund activities throughout the county, throughout Sacramento County. But this is a little bit more expansive than that. In this case, we are going to what's called the Capital Region, and the way it's defined for this program is that we're going to be in communities and in counties which include El Dorado County and Alpine County, which is off of El Dorado County. We're also going to be working in Yolo County, which is exciting for us. We haven't done that recently. And we're going as far as Solano County. So these programs can reach as far as Fairfield and Vallejo. And just remember that all of the activities that happen as part of this program must happen in one of these 5 counties, and every organization that applies must be physically located in one of these 5 counties. So this is super important to know that this application is really going to focus on one of 4 primary areas, and these are the focus areas throughout the state. They're really dealing with some of the biggest challenges that California faces right now. So your campaign, your project should be related to one of these 4 areas. So number 1 would be public health awareness to stop the spread of COVID-19. That could mean many different things in terms of public health awareness, but remember the goal at the end of the program is to stop the spread of COVID-19. Public awareness related to, and these are all separate, so it doesn't have to include all of them, but water and energy conservation, climate mitigation, emergency preparedness, relief and recovery. So things having to do with our environment, whether it's, you know, in rural regions or in the urban core. Civic engagement is the 3rd focus area, and that could include election participation, but any way that communities could be part of the civic engagement process. And finally, social justice and community engagement. And that's probably one area that you're all really familiar with artists working on and being part of and being, you know, instrumental in making social injustice and community engagement things happen. So we will ask you to choose one of these 4 areas when you start your application. So who is eligible for this program? Basically, it's going to be regional 501c3 arts and cultural organizations. We ask that you be a nonprofit organization that's been in operation since January of 2022. So not a very long history, but you need to have some history and you need to be up and running and be in operation for at least a year. You can be an arts and culture nonprofit. You can be a social service organization. You could be health or environmentally centered. You could be a social justice or community focused organization. As a nonprofit, you do need to be in good standing with 2 state entities, and those are the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when you look at your application, because there are links to check on that. I usually don't spend any time on this, but I just want to say that I think as a result of the pandemic and organizations really, some organizations really kind of going into hibernation for a period of time, there's just a lot of filing that needs to happen for an organization to remain in good standing, not only with the Secretary of State, but also the Department of Justice. And I've found in several grants that we've tried to award in the past that organizations during this period have maybe missed filing some paperwork. And as a result, when you go to check their status on these sites, you'll find that they're delinquent. If we look on the site and find an organization is delinquent, even if it's just a little bit of paperwork that isn't filed, for the purpose of this grant, we can't move you forward. So I would ask everybody to check on that as soon as possible to make sure that you're ready to apply, because some of those things are a quick fix, but if you don't do it before you apply, it could cause trouble down the line. You could also be a unit of municipal or county government, and particularly one that has some kind of arts focus or has arts staff. So you could also be a tribal government or local government, a regional arts cooperative with a confirmed fiscal sponsor. We did want to make sure that there was an opportunity for artists who maybe weren't necessarily affiliated with a nonprofit organization to take part in a program like this, but we can only contract with an organization that has a fiscal sponsor that has a nonprofit status. So we ask that you do have a confirmed fiscal sponsor for the program. In the application, if you're applying as an artist cooperative, there's going to be a question saying, who is your fiscal sponsor? And you'd have to upload a letter of agreement that you both agreed for them to sponsor this program. And they would actually be the entity that would go to contract with the city of Sacramento. So they'd have to have certain things in place. But that is a good opportunity. And there are a number of organizations who service fiscal sponsors in the area. A note, if you're using a fiscal sponsor, that fiscal sponsor needs to remain throughout the whole life of the program, which means you can't change halfway through the program if there is a disagreement or an inability to continue to work with the fiscal sponsor. And as I said, individual artists can't apply for this application on their own, but we are going to have another program, and it's going to be a city workforce program where we will be bringing 5 artists on board to the city of Sacramento to work in a particular department for up to a year. So it's an exciting program. It's one that I think we believe is going to reap great benefits, and we'll let you know more about that program as we move on. Okay, just some things to consider before you apply. Really asking you to think about your capacity. It definitely takes time and staff energy to even go through the application process. But if you're funded, you're going to have to devote a lot of time and attention to this work. So as I know, it seems too good to be true to pass up the opportunity to get a grant of this size. We really want you to take a good hard look at what's going to be going on in your organization and what your capacity is going to be over the next year. Because when we start looking at the deadline, you're going to really see that you're going to have to do a lot of focus work in a certain period of time. And so you just want to make sure that you and everybody who'd be working on the project has the capacity to do so. It is going to be easier if you have some kind of history of doing this work, or at least a strong interest in it. This work isn't for everybody. So you really need to know that the kind of work you do, the kind of artwork you do, or if you're not an arts organization, your desire to work with artists and arts organization to move something forward in your organization is really important. It'll be easier if you have a history doing it. You might want to, if you're already involved in the work, you may not have to start from scratch. You might want to use this project as an opportunity to deepen some of the work that you're doing, or to expand some of the cross-sector work that you're doing. It might be a way to move a project that you've gotten a lot of traction with into a new sector, or to add on another component which you had been thinking about doing but didn't have the opportunity. We really want organizations who are really ready to partner for change. The work is very outwardly focused, and we would really want you to want to partner with communities and partner with other organizations to make this happen. And obviously a strong commitment to working in one of those 4 priority areas. If those are issues that are really vital to you and your work, or your personal mission as an artist, that's really an important factor. I did want to spend a couple of minutes talking about organizations that aren't eligible to apply. In this case, for this grant, schools and universities or programs that are embedded in schools or universities are not eligible to apply. For-profit businesses cannot apply. And obviously individuals that are not affiliated with a collective cannot apply. As the applicant, which means you could be an artist that is part of a program working with another organization. So I'm not saying that this program is not for you, but know that there are very specific criteria to be the lead applicant on this project. This is a project that we really want you to center artist's voice. And I wanted to spend a moment to talk about the best ways to center artist's voice. There's some things you might want to think about when you're doing this project. If you're not an arts organization or arts collective, you'd want to be thinking about how you're going to center the artist's voice in your work. So it's not about artists coming to your organization and designing posters or creating flyers for you. You're not creating a message and saying, here, turn this into a work of art. It's really about collaboration. It's about working together. Ways to do this well, get the artist obviously involved in the beginning of the process. The artist should be there from the very beginning to the end and not come in when ideas have already been thought through deeply. Make them co-generators of your work. So ownership of the messaging is really powerful. Use artists as community facilitators. Artists can be great at generating community conversation in ways that maybe you've never thought of before. Artists are also great community organizers. They can use their networks to support the work and messaging and thereby strengthen the project and the impact. And also artists are storytellers. They can help to translate literally and figuratively messages to communities in ways that you might not have ever imagined. And really this can apply to all disciplines. So I don't want you to think of art too narrowly when you're doing this. It could be visual, it could be spoken or written word. It could be theater, design, music, and dance. So there are projects that include all of those examples that could be really wonderful and meaningful, and would be strong projects for this type of a program. Just want to talk about the 2 application programs. As I said, we have 2 grants. I would imagine that for most people, this is the grant that you'll probably be looking at. These are our mid-sized grants. There are more that will be awarded. So there will be 20 grants awarded in this category. Our aim is for 35% to go to rural communities, which still leaves a large number of awards to go to our urban core, but that's the goal we're setting out. I mean, if we don't get 35% applications from rural projects, that will switch, but we are really going to try to make sure that we are also hitting some of the more rural populations in our region. Nonprofit organizations, obviously, as we said, or fiscally sponsored cooperatives. And as I also said, units of government, tribal governments, all of those are eligible to apply. And it's really important to know that for these grants, and this comes down from the CAC in terms of the proportion that need to go to artists. For our grant program, 70% of the funds must go directly to artists. So just remember, as you're creating a budget for a program like this, if the grant is $117,000, 81,900 of that amount you'll have to demonstrate is going directly to artists. And this is the other grant application that we also have open, and these are larger grants. They're $300,000 grants, but we're only awarding 5 of these grants. And 1 will be designated for each of the 4 largest counties, and 2 will be designated for Sacramento. So 2 in Sacramento, 1 in Yolo, 1 in El Dorado, Alpine combined, and 1 in Solano County. So if you have a program that you think warrants this kind of grant, please feel free to apply. Just know it's going to be a little bit more competitive because there are fewer that are going out and they need to be spread equitably throughout our region. For this grant only, you cannot be an artist collective. You need to be a nonprofit or a unit of local or tribal government. And as with the smaller grants, 70% of these funds also must go directly to artists. So it's really not specifically for overhead or other expenses. 210,000 of that 300,000 will need to be paid directly to artists. Okay, so the most important thing that I really want to talk to you about today is the rubric for the grant application. And a rubric is just a guide for scoring. All of our grant applications go through a panel review process, and it's a peer review panel. So staff does not review your applications. We don't score you. We will review them for eligibility, but that's it. Once you've met the basic eligibility, these will go on to a panel to read. And the panel is usually from across the country, so they're not all local or even primarily local, but will include experts in both the art fields and representatives from some of our other program areas. So the best way for you to score well on a grant application is to really pay attention to what we're looking for, what we believe is the most important, are the most important elements to a strong proposal for this project. And for this grant, the rubric has 4 sections. It would be a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, the program design, community impact, and organizational readiness. So I don't know if any of you have looked at the guidelines yet, but again, those are going to be your guideposts throughout this project. So I'm going to just go through some of the areas in each of these categories that you really want to be thinking about as you fill out your application. So under diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, we're going to be looking at the number of artists employed who come from marginalized communities. We're going to look to see if the organization applying, if their work is rooted in and expresses the experiences of historically marginalized communities. So does your work really relate to basically the audience and the community that you would be working with? And do you have a history of working in these communities? So not only do you value that work, but have you also had a history that you can demonstrate that you worked in these areas? And I want, before I go any further, I also want to preface is that every applicant is not going to score at the very top in all aspects of the rubric. That would be almost impossible. It would be, it would be amazing, but it would be, everybody's going to have their strengths and everybody's going to have slight weaknesses. I always say the most important thing is to maximize what you're good at, maximize the areas that you feel like you're really strong at, and then see what you could do to improve in some of the other areas. So 20% of the scoring is going to be DEIA scoring. 30% will be devoted to the program design. And that's obvious. It's really about what kind of program you're putting together. Is this a project that's going to be exciting, different, unique, compelling to a panel? And is it something that's going to be doable? So we're going to look at this, the connection to one of the 4 the focus areas, like how strongly is your proposal connected to one of those 4 areas. We are going to be looking at the number of artists engaged or employed. You might put together a proposal and a project that is really sort of wonderful and interesting and different, but you decide, we really only need 2 artists to work on this program. that may be less compelling than an application that has more artists employed. Because remember, way back in the beginning of this presentation, I told you it really is a workforce development project. So we really want to see as many people as possible engaged with this work. So if you have 2 lead artists, can you create a project that you can also engage more artists into the work in some way? So that's really important. We look at the fairness of the model for the artist's pay. And people say, well, we really just don't know how much to pay artists. Can you tell us what a fair pay is? And while we don't do that on our website, we have frequently asked questions. We have a document that explains some of the things that are in the application and helps you answer some of the questions that have come up to us. And in this FAQ, there is a link to a site that really talks about fair pay for artists. So we really recommend to everybody go take a look at that and see what the pay scale is so that you can kind of see, are you offering a fair wage to artists? Is it something that is comparable to what other artists working in this field would be making? That's really important to us. We'll want to be knowing the extent of the artist's participation in the design and execution of the project, the strength of the artistic concept as a communications campaign. So obviously the end result is that you're really trying to communicate something in one of these focus areas to a particular community. And we want to see that that's as strong a connection as you could possibly make. And the feasibility of the project and your ability to complete it within the time frame designated. So those are questions we're going to ask about design. Community impact is also rated at 30% of the application. So again, that's another strong area that we'll be looking into. We're going to be looking there at the relevance of the project's focus area to the targeted community that you're looking at. So that's really important. Perhaps if you were working with a rural community or a community where emergency preparedness or climate mitigation is a really powerful issue there, that would be a stronger connection to that community. We don't have any guidelines for this. It's just important that you're able to make the case that the community that you're working with is really in line with the kind of project you want to do. We want to be sure that your organization is either located in or for this project serves the lowest quartile of the Healthy Places Index. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but we really will be leaning into that in our projects. And we're going to look at the degree to which the project is obviously co-designed with community or driven by community input and engagement. We don't want you to just throw a program into a community without that community saying they value it, they want it, and they have some input to the design of it or into what happens as the project moves forward. And we'll look at the potential audience reach of that project. So are you really able to reach, and can you demonstrate that this project is going to be able to reach many people? We're going to take a look at that as well. And then finally, we're going to look at organizational readiness. And I talked a little bit about that earlier, but it's about how ready are you to take on a project like this? We'll ask questions as about, do you have experience and familiarity with the targeted communities you're working with? Do you have a history of programming or activities in any of the focused areas? If you're not an arts organization, do you have any history of artistic programming or activity? Is this something that you've done in the past? Do you have an experience in cross-sector exploration? Are you able to demonstrate methods for ensuring accuracy of campaign messaging? That's really important. We want to make sure that the messages that are being put out in communities have some data behind them. So either you're working with an organization that's working in one of these focus areas, or you have access to very, very good, strong data that's going to back up the type of work you're doing. Excuse me. The appropriateness of the partners to the project concept. We'll look at the alignment of the budget with proposed activities. So does your budget really make sense for what you say you're going to do. Is it the project too ambitious? Is the project not ambitious enough? And does the budget match? And obviously, we're going to look at your budget to make sure that you've allotted enough money for artists in the project. And do you have any experience in developing and executing community communications and outreach activities? So that's a lot. So as I said before, you're probably not going to have experience in every single aspect of it, but bring what you have to the table, bring your strengths to the table. That's the most important thing. And for the larger grants, I'm not going to go into the whole rubric, so they're very, very similar. The only things that we've added is obviously what the eligibility is, and I've spoken to you about that. In these larger grants, we're going to maybe ask a little deeper about the partnership. That's going to have to be key. We would probably expect you to be working cross-sector in some way. If you're an arts organization, obviously that you at least are partnering with one other organization, and that you've had some past history or intentional interactions with an organization cross-sector. The HPI is always going to be prominent, but it's going to be super prominent. We're going to ask you to really dig into it for these larger grants. We're going to ask you for an outreach plan, like how you expect to reach the audience that you say you're going to reach. We'll want to make sure that the pathway you're chosen is very strongly aligned with the needs of that community. We're going to look at the budgets and timelines, same as the other grant. And there's one extra additional component, if you did want to apply for these larger grants, is that we're going to be looking at staff capacity. And we did make the decision for these grants that an organization would need to have paid permanent staff with evidence of W-2 payments to staff. So not staff who operate as contractors, but definitely as paid permanent staff. And you would have to show evidence of that for these grants. Just really quickly, we're going to be looking for outcomes, because that's the important thing. We want to demonstrate that this is the kind of program that should be carried on into the future, and that this work is really valuable. So we're going to be looking at the community engagement. We're going to look to see who's building new relationships and how strong these relationships are. What are some new structures for collaboration? We're going to look at the number of communities served, the number of artists employed, the rate of pay that goes to artists through these programs, and that we see that organizations are employing artists from marginalized communities. That's also really important to us here at the Office of Arts and Culture. So just a little bit about the California Healthy Places Index. And this is just a way for you to really locate where you need to be working on these programs. There's the website for the California Healthy Places Index, but we also have it linked on our website. And we also have a really good video that the California Healthy Places Index created, which shows you how to use their mapping piece. And it's intuitive and it's not difficult, and it's really helpful. Many of you have worked on grants or on projects that maybe have worked in qualified census tracts or in the promise zone. California Healthy Places Index is just another way to sort of look at community. And it's a tool that was developed by the Public Health Alliance of Southern California. And the goal was to advance equity through open data. And they look at social determinants of health. And according to the California Healthy Places Index, they track 23 social determinants of health in a community. So you can look at a community and see the determinants of health that are related to, obviously, good transportation, public parks, children enrolled in preschool is an indicator of health, access to healthcare, students enrolled in high school. There are all these different indicators that you can look at separately, and will show you where a community scores high, low, or in the middle of any of those indicators. But you can also look at a community as a whole. And then you can dig down pretty deeply. So you could look at, say, the city of Sacramento as a whole, but then you could look at certain neighborhoods and how they determine them, as they call them, tracks on the map of the Healthy Places Index. So our focus for this program is what we call quartile 1 of the Healthy Places Index, which would be the lowest 25% of the Healthy Places Index. And that's looking at all the different elements together as they're brought together. Because we really want to serve these communities. We know that health can be improved in all of these communities. And again, the areas that we're focusing on in this project will really have an impact for these communities. As I said, it drills down to the neighborhood level and the track level, and it helps us reveal some of the biggest challenges these communities are facing, and it gives you a good indication of that. So here is just sort of a sample page. It's got a lot up on it, so it's a little bit hard to see, but it shows you Sacramento County specifically. And what I want you to focus on is when we're talking about the quartiles, the areas that you really want to focus on are the dark blue areas. The dark blue areas are the 0 to 25 percentile, so quartile 1. And as you can see in this, in Sacramento County, it's pretty clear where they are. There's a big dark blue section in the south, and there's a significant section in the north. And then there are a couple of other little pockets in different areas. And any of those communities are communities that you could focus on in Sacramento County. If you're in any one of our other counties, what I would say is that you should check with, if you're in El Dorado County or Yolo County, they'll help you interpret the Healthy Places Index for your county. For example, if you look at El Dorado County, there is no dark blue in El Dorado County, but you can sort of reconfigure that map for that county specifically, and it will re-rank it and bring out the dark blues in that area. And anybody that happens to be working in Alpine County, because it's a rural county and it doesn't have any, it's just not tracked. It's so small that it's not tracked by the California Healthy Places Index. So any project in Alpine County would be considered eligible for this program. But you can ask us any questions in the future if you want more information about using this tool. So quickly, deadlines. We've already done our orientation webinar, and that's online. The guidelines have been posted and they are also on our website. The application is definitely open. We are doing a number of mixers specifically right now. We're doing the orientation, this webinar, but we're also having some in-person mixers next week. Next Wednesday, we're doing one on Del Paso Boulevard. We'll be doing another one here in Sacramento, down in South Sacramento. There's going to be one in Yolo County next week also in Woodland, and there'll be another one in Davis. So look at our website because everything is updated and you'll see all the events. And when we say they're mixers, that's sort of the way we're kind of designing them. They're informational, but they're also an opportunity for people to get together, to talk cross-sector, to meet other people who are interested in this program, to ask questions, to get a better feel for what the application is going to be like, and also to understand who some of the players are in this area. For those of you who maybe were at our other webinar and thought the application was closing at mid-April, we've been able to extend the deadline, and we hope that helps people till May 1st, but that is absolutely our last deadline. We can't extend it any longer because on our end, there's a lot of approval processes that a grant needs to go through. And we need to give a panel a long time to really sit with these and read them thoroughly and score them and meet. And again, our panel process is a peer panel review, and then we have an open public panel meeting, and we'll publish the date when we know when that is. And then the awards will be approved sometime in July, and by August or September, it's up to you, but certainly by August 2023, we'll be ready to start. We will go to contract, and the program must end on September 2024. So you have at least 12 months and perhaps 13 months if you're ready to start early. So here are some resources. That's the email address if you want to contact us and ask any kind of questions. We basically say within 24 hours, we will get back to you with some kind of answer during the week. There's our website, and that should give you all the latest information. If you want to know more about the California Arts Council and how they've structured the program, there's the link to the California Arts Council's website and the Creative Core program, because these programs are all over the state and they're very different in different places. I've also put some links to some really good resources if you're just trying to figure out, well, what does a good project look like? This is a great tool. They're field scans from the Creative Placemaking Research, and they'll give you lots of examples of different artistic disciplines, different ways to think about community issues and challenges in communities, and how organizations can work in communities and use artists to really make their work stronger. There's another toolkit for health and arts and parks and equity, which has also got some great examples if you're interested in working around health and parks. You know, you'd have to try to figure out how those would fit within the 4 priority areas, but there seems to be a little bit of leeway in some of those focus areas. And these are just ideas to spark ideas from you. And then there's something on Policy Link, which talks about, it's a document that's called We Making, and it's the framework. It's a really interesting document if you want to read more deeply into how to do this kind of work, if it's something that you want to keep pursuing. So before we go to questions, I just want to give you some quick grant writing tips that have occurred to us based on other grants that we've received. I know it's really appealing to open that application and jump right in and start answering questions, but I highly recommend that you read the full guidelines, which are posted separately on our website before you begin the application. The application will have like a mini introduction to the guidelines, but if you read the full guidelines, you're going to get all the elements and all of the areas that you need to focus on. So even before you begin to start, look at the guidelines and start framing the ideas. I recommend that you talk to someone about your project to be sure that it's really clear. I think often we get ideas in our head and then we're starting to answer questions and put the proposal down. It becomes fuzzier. So make sure somebody else has had a chance to read and make sure they understand what you're doing. As I said, review the rubric and also review the frequently asked questions on our website, because it's going to give you some more tips. It's going to break down some of these concepts that we're talking about and provide more explanation than we could do in guidelines. Really establish your partnerships early. Partnerships and getting people on board to a project takes time, and the application, you've got about 6 weeks to complete an application. And if we're asking for letters of support, or we're asking, you know, who are the artists and how are you engaging in activities, it's really important that you have those all in place. So start talking to people now to see if they're on board. Same thing with getting your fiscal agent secured. We're going to ask that you upload a letter where you've both signed it. And I know if you wait to the last minute, there's always that situation where the person who needs to sign it is out of town for a week and you can't get it done. And the application needs to be 100% complete when you submit it. So get those things taken care of early. I always say don't wait until the last minute to submit, because that's when you're going to start panicking a little bit, rushing the process, and you're going to feel like there's not enough time. And if you have any technical difficulties, you might not have time to solve them before submitting the application. And ask questions. We are going to provide as much support as we can. So we encourage you, don't call us because we're not really in the office very often, but I would say use that email address that we've provided to ask any kind of questions you might have. We will also have a link to sign up probably in the next couple of weeks to work with a grant writing advisor. We'll have a couple of them on board here in Sacramento. I think Yolo and El Dorado are both doing their own. So if you're in those counties, you might want to check with your arts agencies in those counties to see if they can help you with the application, because they know your county and they know what's most important there. So those are kind of my general tips. And there aren't a ton of questions. So I just want to take these few questions that are in the Q&A. And after doing that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We're going to just take a quick look at the application and show you how to start that. Where do I find out how Artist Collective is defined and how to demonstrate an artist collective is active with a sponsor? I didn't find anything on it on the website. That's a great question. An artist collective, we've left that a little bit open because we wanted to leave a window open for artists to get together. I mean, there are some artist collectives who are already well established. It may just mean a group of artists who work together generally and often, and just don't have a nonprofit status. They never feel like they needed to. They maybe use a fiscal agent when they write grants or grant applications, and maybe they've never had to do that before, so they haven't seen a need. You would have to apply as a collective. There's no official, designation for it, but the application would not just have one person's name. It would have to be, you would have to sort of create your artist collective name, submit together, and you would have to find a organization, a nonprofit organization that could be your fiscal sponsor. There are people that do fiscal sponsorship. I'm not sure that I have access to who all of them are, and I would hate to just make recommendations. I think it's probably up to the organization to find out who does it. It often tends to be somebody who works in your discipline. So if you are an organization that works in poetry, for example, I would check with an organization that's a nonprofit that runs poetry programs in the city and see if they could be your fiscal sponsor. It really just needs to be an organization that has a nonprofit status and has the ability to, help you with the reporting and fulfilling the grant agreement requirements. Fiscal sponsors often charge a fee, so don't be surprised if they would charge somewhere between 5 and 10% of the grant amount to act as a fiscal sponsor. So you'd probably need to write that into your budget, and that's applicable for your budget. Can you share how fiscal sponsor will aid regional artists or businesses? The fiscal sponsor is just there to sign the contract for you to make sure that everything that you're doing is meets the requirements of the city of Sacramento. Whenever we have a grant application and we sign a grant agreement, it's a pretty significant document. It's usually like a 12 to 15 page agreement. In some cases, we have to have insurance certificates. We have to have proof of nonprofit status, and that organization would be the one that would be granted the money. So if you had a fiscal sponsor for $117,000, that organization would get the grant, and then they would give you the money that you need to do the project. So there are organizations that do it. I would check with them. I would say maybe the Impact Foundry may do it. I know they've done it in the past, but I hate to volunteer anybody. So I would maybe just look to see who does fiscal sponsorships here in Sacramento. I love how this to center artist voice and wondering how organizations will solicit artists. Is there any guidelines on that too? Also a really great question. Some organizations may already have relationships with artists. They may already have worked with artists to do certain projects, so that would be an easier mix for them. If it's an organization that's saying, I love doing this, I think this is a great idea, we have messaging that we would love to help spread the word about some program, or not even spread the word, we'd like to collect information from a community and we need outreach and engagement. We just don't know how to do it, but we think artists would be great. Where do we find those artists? I recommend coming to the mixers because artists will be attending mixers and other events. I would say sort of reach out to any arts organization that you know of if there's a particular type of art form you want to work with. It's really just putting yourself out there and trying to find the right people. But I would say come to the mixers as sort of your first way in. Media, short film, documentary, absolutely. I think film is an excellent tool for this work. And definitely short film and documentary. Again, take a look at the budget and make sure that whatever you're thinking of doing could be done within the budget you have and within the time you have. But absolutely a great type of project. When you say 70% must go to artists, that include administrators, project, I would say not necessarily administrators, no. I would say if the project manager is an artist, we're going to be asking for bios of the people who are going to be paid and doing the work. So we really are asking you to really submit. Project managers could get the money, but they need to be artists. They are included in the sample budget because we know that there's administration needed. But again, that's not part of the 70%. So if there is a whole personnel expense, we're going to look and see was, 30% or, it's going to be the whole budget. So again, it's not personnel 70%, it's the artist part of the personnel that's 70%. And again, this is specific to what we need to do to fulfill the CAC's requirements. Can an artist participate and apply with more than one organization? An artist can participate, but remember the artist can't apply. So yes, an artist could participate in different projects, but they would need to be written into the organization's project. It would probably be great for the organization to know that you're working on different things, but that's up to you. We're planning to create a film and we're planning to interview folks from outside of the region. However, we have filmmakers from within the region to execute the production. To what extent does the project have to take place within the capital region? 100%. Yes, this project needs to be 100% capital region. So if it's a film project, if there's something that you could pull out from the entire film project that would be related to this community, this capital region, this population, and we're going to ask you to be really specific. So it's not generally, it's about the capital region. I'm going to ask you what neighborhoods you're going into. How are those people engaging in the project? If you're doing a project about the region, where is your source of information in one of those focus areas? So it's got to be one of the 4 focus areas. So if it's not one of those, and it shouldn't be a conglomeration of all of them, we really want you to focus on one. If you're doing any more than one, we're going to ask you why you're doing more than one. So again, really think focusing. Do fiscal sponsors ask for a fee? Yeah, I think they should because they are going to be doing some work for this application. They're going to have to register with the city of Sacramento. They're going to have to be managing your invoices and paying you and making sure that the entities that they're working with are fulfilling the grant. Because if they're not, it's the organization who's going to be on the line for the grant. And the city of Sacramento, where our grant agreements are pretty strict. I mean, if you've got to follow the letter of the agreement, or we could end the project and request the money back. Can the 30% include operational costs like rent, utilities, et cetera? Absolutely, it could, but just remember there are also artistic costs. So be thinking about what those might be as well in the 30%. Can a City of Sacramento entity apply as a collaborative? I would say maybe ask me that offline and be more specific so we could kind of understand, so that I could understand specifically what you're talking about, because perhaps, but I just want to understand it a little bit better. So email me. Thanks. Would a producer for a media project be considered an artist? If that producer is an artist, I mean, we're asking you to be really upfront with us. And we have really good panelists, so they can kind of read between the lines usually. So if you consider that producer an artist and can make a good case for that producer being an artist, it's probably okay. And I already answered the fiscal, and can we use grant money to pay them? Yes, you can use grant money to pay the fiscal sponsor fee, sure. When, how are artists given an opportunity to share what they need funding for with the Office of Arts and Culture? Is there a survey opportunity, or is that a one-on-one conversation? We always, welcome artists to talk to us about what they need. We don't have a lot. I mean, I'm going to be totally honest with you. We don't have a lot of opportunities to fund individual artists directly with the city. We've done more of that recently because we've had federal relief funds, but those funds are coming to an end and will come to an end soon. So our grant funding will be somewhat limited, but I certainly welcome at least an email if there's something. It's just we fund based on programs, so you can't come to us and say, oh, there's something I'd really like to do. Do you have money for me to do that? We don't have that kind of funding available. Okay, so if Diana can put up the application, and I'm not gonna go through every single thing, but I want you to see how you get into it and maybe focus on some of the highlights so you know that you're answering correctly. So you're gonna you're gonna go to Submittable, and that's where the application is. And Diana, you register for an account, correct?
Yes, so you either already have one, or you would go here and sign up. And once you've done that, you would be taken to our main page. So any application or any grant that we have currently open will be located on this page.
All right, and so these two grants are right at the top. People have asked if they could apply for both. You can. You can only get one. But I'm going to say, again, really think long and hard before applying for the large one, because it's going to be a lot of extra work on your part, and you really need to think like this is the program that really needs this $300,000 grant for Sacramento, because those will be a little harder. So let's go to the mid-size grant. Can you open that up? So it says submit, and sometimes that's confusing people because they think, well, does that mean I'm submitting the grant application? That's just how you get into your grant application. As we said, there's a little introduction to the program here, but that's not the full guidelines, and there's a link to get back to the full guidelines. So look at that first before you do anything. You're going to start with your basic information. Please remember, if you are an individual, it's going to sort of ask for organizational information. So name yourself something if you're a collective of some sort. And so organizational name and all the project information. Please fill out everything completely. Every time you see a little red asterisk, it means you must complete that information. It's really important for us to collect this information. And please give us an address, a mailing address, if it's different than your physical address, but we do need your physical address. We're going to ask your organizational type. So those are, a lot of them are just pull down menus. So you can just check it there. If you're a nonprofit organization, your tax ID number, and you're going to upload your tax letter. Again, if you're using a fiscal sponsor, this is where you're going to upload your letter of agreement. So just so that you know, most of the little prompts for how to fill things out are underneath the questions that you're looking at. So we're going to look at your total revenue for the year before, when your fiscal year is, your revenue, your mission of your organization. If your organization, we're going to ask the year it was founded or established, and the core programs and services of your organization. So what do you do? Your audience and constituency, who, and this is, and please don't just put everybody or the entire city of Sacramento or the entire county. Be really, really specific. I think a lot of people kind of gloss over their audience. We want to know who your core audience is. And we ask for geographical, cultural, any other demographic that you can share with us about your audience. Your history of working with and in marginalized communities. And you'll also see there are different character limits for everything. Please don't feel you need to use up every bit of your character limit. You are going to be confined to them, but if you can answer the question more quickly, feel free to do so. It's less for panelists to read, but if you really need the extra explanation, add it. So we want to make sure that you are letting us know if your organization is in or serves a quartile 1 community. Yeah, we want to know that. We want to know your county. And we're mostly asking you not to check more than 1 county, but if you're reaching multiple counties, be specific about why and what your focus area is. So those are the 4 areas. And then these are all your questions about your program, your project, the artists that you're going to be employing, the number of artists, how you do your cross-sector work, number of artists from marginalized communities. If you know this information, if you have this information, please put it in. That is a question that you do have to answer. So yeah, try to answer that question best as you can. Provide a description of artists who have been identified to work on this project. If you have not identified specifically the artists yet, we're going to ask you to at least tell us how the artists are going to be selected. And we ask you, if you do know the artist, to upload their bios. The budget form, you're going to have to download it, and there is the link to get it from the website. So you download the budget form, and then you fill it all out, and then you upload it here. How the budget supports activities, the timeline for the project, and then we talk about the community served. Obviously, again, don't forget to really lean into the California Healthy Places Index. And questions about relevance and community. So these are all of your community impact questions. And the last section is the organizational capacity questions. So we're asking you about your experience working in the focus areas or with different communities, your experience in cross-sector work, and all of those other things. And at the very bottom, and this is really only for nonprofit organizations, there is it's a voluntary demographic information. It's really important for us to collect demographic information because we can use it later to inform other programs we're doing. So we thank you in advance for filling out this as much as you possibly can. It doesn't go into your the part of the application that's going to be reviewed. You will not be reviewed on this. This is just a way so that we understand better who we're serving and who we're not serving. So we hope you can take that seriously and do that. Please just keep saving it as you're doing it. You don't have to do this application all at one time. But when you submit, then it is submitted and it would be closed to you, and you would have to request it to be opened up again. But again, save your work as you go along, and yeah, get an early start on it. But I really recommend that you don't jump into the application immediately, but maybe start with the guidelines and see how well you can answer those questions. Let's see, one more question. who is actually filling out the application? Do the artists do this on behalf of their partnering organization, or is the organization filling this out? If the organization is the lead applicant, it makes the most sense that the organization fills this out, unless you're talking about a fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor does not fill this out, but the applying nonprofit organization would fill this out. They could ask you to collaborate. Diana, do you want to show that little collaboration tool? You could possibly collaborate on it. They could ask you questions. You could feed them information, but they'd be filling it out. Oh, there it is. So up in the top on that little section, there's a little tool called Manage Collaborators. And you would click on that, and it would allow the applicant to add a collaborator, add their email, and then both, once they're invited and they accept the invitation, then I think both of them could access the application and work together. You don't have to do it this way. If you'd rather have one person working on it and just feed the information, you can, but this might be a nice way for people who are in different places to be able to look at the application together. So I think those are all the questions. Do I have any other questions before we end? I answered that question. As an artist collective, how are you asking, how does an artist collective apply? An artist collective needs to create a name for itself, know who the artists are, and really talk about themselves. If you are just a group of artists coming together for the very first time, I think you're going to struggle a little bit applying for this application unless you are sort of a unified whole that can create what's our mission for ourselves. How are we going to explain who we are and why we've come together? Again, you're trying to create the most competitive application you possibly can. So you really want to show us that there's some glue that holds you together as a collaborative. Again, there are collaboratives out there who are already up and running and working in this way. If you are an artist who is just looking for other people to collaborate with, I would say you might be better served to find an organization that might be applying, come to the mixers, meet people, maybe work with another arts organization that works in your discipline and say, hey, I'd like to come on to your project. Or else look to the artist application that we're going to have for the artist cohort in city government. Can a local media production company, I'm assuming, be able to apply if they are a nonprofit media company? Yes. If they are a for-profit business, no. Okay. I think that's everything. Again, email us. Our email, everything is on the website, arts.cityofsacramento.org. You will find resources for everything and links. Check out the mixer on Del Paso Boulevard next week. And thank you all for coming today, and hope you see a lot of great applications.